In this video, we're going to explore the WS2811 LED driver chip. I'm going to show you some cool tips and tricks on how you can get way more out of this part than you ever imagined possible. One of my many roles in the universe is that of the engineering consultant. And when I'm doing that, my favorite client to work for is the Austrian visual artist Erwin Redl. So we're going to explore solving some of the technical problems in the creation of one of Erwin's amazing art pieces. Erwin and I have had a long and fruitful relationship that spans decades. I've come to know and understand his aesthetic principles and his very high standards. It's these high standards that make the work interesting and rewarding. Erwin is not satisfied with the generic solution to many problems. We often end up going way above and beyond in search of the ultimate in aesthetic outcomes. The project itself is called the Rhinebeck Matrix. It consists of belts of LED lights that wrap around trees on a private collector's estate. Each belt consists of between 12 and 24 candy bar-sized white light bars, which must produce a beautiful and precisely controllable amount of white light. Each belt is then dimmed and controlled to create an orbiting pool of light that revolves around the tree. This pattern is coordinated at a very high level such that all the trees together form a symphony of light that's constantly changing and evolving. The first challenge of the project was really to identify the right kind of light source that gave the perfect aesthetic result. We quickly converged upon using the white light COB or chip on board module as the primary light source. These modules use highly efficient LEDs and are generally operated at much higher power levels than we need. Since we're looking directly at the light, it doesn't need to be that crazy bright. It just needs to be really even and dimmed very smoothly. We obtained some samples and Erwin evaluated them to determine what current level we would need to drive them at. It was determined that 100 milliamps at about 9 volts did the job admirably. At this low power level, we don't need any heat sink, which makes packaging the whole unit much easier. This artwork plays out over a large area of land. The combined cable runs are over 650 feet or 200 meters. That's a lot of cable. At each tree, we have between 12 and 24 light modules. We need a high data rate here to affect the smooth control of the dimming. We're really confronted here with a classic trade-off. It's relatively easy to send low-speed data a long distance, or high-speed data a very short distance. What's hard to do is to send high-speed data long distance. So this really drives the choice of architecture for our system. The solution is what we call the wave generator. It's a small single board computer whose job it is to create the high-speed data stream for the LED bars. These wave generator modules receive high-level macro commands over an RS-485 network running at 1200 baud. This network allows them all to communicate with the master control computer, which is a Raspberry Pi located in the main pool house. To keep the aesthetic of the piece as clean as possible, it was desirable to make the wiring on the trees as minimalist as possible. The simplest possible scheme, obviously, is to use a 3-wire connection: power, ground, and a single data line that feeds in a daisy chain of data from one LED bar to the next. The WS2811 LED driver was an immediate candidate that came to mind to solve this problem. We had to overcome 2 serious limitations to make this idea work. The first one is obviously the drive current. 18.5 milliamps is not enough for our COB LED array. We need around 100 milliamps. The second limitation is that the 8-bit resolution of the part is not good enough to meet Erwin's standards. When we drive that cob at 100 milliamps, the first few brightness level changes are extremely noticeable. It's really chunky and grainy, not smooth and sexy like it needs to be. Not good enough. An interesting idea presents itself when we realize that the WS2811 actually has 3 channels. What we can do is use one channel to control the LED current and another channel to PWM the LED. This extends our effective bit depth quite a bit. With this scheme, we can get really smooth dimming right down to the lowest brightness levels by controlling the LED current in concert with the PWM. The architecture of this solution is pretty simple. First, we need to take one of the channels and convert its PWM output to a DC voltage. We then take this DC voltage and use it to control a voltage-controlled current source, which allows us to adjust the LED current. The second channel then controls a switch, which turns the LED on and off while being driven by our controllable current. Now, conceptually, this all makes sense. Now we've got to design some circuitry to make it all happen. That means understanding the inner workings of this chip on a very intimate level. Unfortunately, the datasheet is just not up to the task. It totally glosses over a lot of critical details about how these outputs actually work. So let's investigate and figure out what's missing from the datasheet and then start designing from there. Firstly, the outputs are current sinks. This means they dynamically adjust their impedance to maintain the preset 18.5 milliamps of nominal current. The absolute maximum voltage that can be applied to the output is 12 volts, not to be exceeded. The frequency of the PWM output is about 2 kHz, or about 500 microseconds as a period. The outputs never go to 100% on. The most you're going to get with an input code of 255 is about 95%. LEDs just don't care about that last 10%. It's not visible. The output duty cycle is not linear to the input code. The chip applies gamma correction to even out the brightness. The output changes in larger steps as the value increases. This can be annoying with some types of loads. Just beware. The VDD pin contains a Zener diode regulator, around 5.5 volts. This can be very useful for powering the chip from higher voltages, but be careful never to overload this diode with too much current. So let's take a really detailed look at this. Here's the actual schematic for an LED bar. For now, let's ignore the fancy stuff that's going on around the data input and just focus on how we drive the LED. If we focus in on the first two channels of the WS2811, the out R and out G, which are the channels 1 and 2, we can see that both of these channels are directly connected to the emitters of NPN transistors Q3 and Q4. The absolute maximum voltage you're supposed to apply to these outputs is 12 volts. In a typical configuration, you've got LEDs in series with the power supply, which serves to reduce that voltage down by the forward drop of the LEDs. The bases of both of these transistors are connected to VDD, which is about 5.4 volts. This serves to pin the emitter voltage at about 600 millivolts lower, or about 4.8 volts. This configuration then allows the current that goes into the output to pass through the transistor, but the output voltage that the driver sees is never more than 4.8 volts. The output current of channel 1 passes through R2. This 18.5 milliamps going through this resistor produces about 3 volts of voltage drop across R2. The end of R2 that's connected to the power supply becomes our reference point. The lower end of R2 then is our output voltage, which is always below 12 volts. This 3 volt pulse that appears across R2 is then filtered or integrated by C1 and R5 into a constant DC voltage, which appears across C1. Again, this voltage is a reference to the 12 volt supply, not ground. This resulting voltage is now buffered by Q2, which serves as an emitter follower. This serves to lower the impedance of this output voltage so that we can drive other circuits without it getting loaded down. The buffered reference voltage appearing on Q2's emitter gets applied to the base of Q1. Q1 and R4 now form a current source, which supplies a constant current out of Q1's collector that is proportional to the voltage on the base. This forms the voltage-controlled current source part of our circuit. Next, we need a way to turn this current on and off using the PWM output from channel 2. Q4, R3, and D1 form a switch which serves to shut off the current source when the output is not active. This occurs because R3 and D1 form a shunt path that shunts the current around the current source into Q2. The voltage drop across R3 and D1 is not enough to turn the transistor on, so it stays off. When output 2 turns on, the current flow through Q4 and R3 causes the anode of D1 to drop by about 2.2 volts. This effectively shuts off current flow through that branch. The diode is reverse biased, so the current can only then flow through the base of Q1, which turns the transistor on. These modern Cobb LED modules are so efficient that even the tiniest leakage current flowing through them will make them glow. To prevent this, we put R7 across the LED module, which serves to shunt any leakage currents around the LED. It takes about 900 microamps to get the LED to start glowing. This prevents any leakage from causing a problem. What's really important to wrap your head around in this circuit is the fact that the constant current source for the LED references the plus 12 volts, not ground. All the voltages that we're looking at in this circuit are relative to that 12 volt supply, not ground. The neat trick we're doing here is really to use the constant current output of the WS2811 to act as a level shifter. We're effectively shifting a reference voltage from being ground referenced to being plus 12 volt referenced. This allows our whole circuit to float on the 12 volt rail and not care about the difference between 12 volts and ground. If the supply voltage changes, our output current will not change. Let's shift our attentions now to the digital input part of the circuit. U2 is a differential line receiver. It's configured such that the digital input to our light bar can be either single-ended or differential. When we're communicating between two adjacent light bars that are separated by about 20 centimeters of wire, we just use a single-ended configuration. We send data into the D-in plus terminal and it all just works normally. The inverting or B input is biased at half the supply voltage, which just sets a threshold, and everything works normally. The first light bar in the array is the one that connects to the wave generator. This could be mounted meters away over long sketchy cables. So in this mode we switch over to differential signaling. We apply differential signal to D-in minus and D-in plus. The jumper is shorted, which puts a 120 ohm termination across the line. As anyone who's messed with these addressable LEDs knows, long wires and heavy current are the bane of your existence when it comes to getting data into these things. Going differential makes it so much more robust.